Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alan with another broadcast of the Morlog Morning Digest. Please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, but most importantly, share the content and help our channel grow. Be sure to check out the description below. It has a link to my backup channel as well as a couple donation options. No obligation, but it helps me moving forward. I want to say thank you to all of our new subscribers, as well as a giant welcome back to those of you that continue to give me your support and help the channel grow. Today, I want to talk about something that I see coming, and I don't think it's avoidable at all, and I want to give you guys a public service announcement about what that is. Now, in order for me to do that, I need to go back to the beginning of the year and talk about the event that actually caused my channel to blow up and blossom into what it has today, and that is the coronavirus. I was one of the first people on YouTube to start covering this on a day-to-day basis, right? And I'm pretty sure I'm one of the first people to verbally state that the United States was going to be put under quarantine and our entire country was going to get locked down just like it did. I said this was going to happen shortly after China even announced the virus and before they implemented their quarantines, okay? Now, the reason I came to this conclusion is because the international media picked up on COVID way too quick for it to be a coincidence. And the reason that I had that chain of logic is because I remembered back to Ebola in Africa, right, in the Congo, and the spread of that disease. Now, the international media did pick it up, but it never gained the traction that coronavirus did, okay? It took months and months and months for Ebola to even show up in the international media, and on top of that, like I said, it never gained traction. Whereas as soon as this virus was introduced in China, right, it picked up and was spread through mainstream media like a wildfire all over the world. Now, with that being stated, I want to talk about why this is so relevant to what we're getting at today. Well, I'm making the same prediction about 4 months from now as I was at the beginning of the year. Our country is going to be pushed towards a second lockdown. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to happen because I don't think that it is, but that is definitely the narrative and the next game plan that I see coming. Now, the reason I see this happening is because on Memorial Day, right, a bunch of riots and protests broke out all over the country, right? Now, last Friday I should say, mainstream media just started to report about COVID-19 cases skyrocketing. Now, they aren't correlating it to the protests or the riots that were engineered, right? And it's key that you realize that they were engineered. It is key that you understand that. This was not a grassroots push for police reform or for police brutality to come to an end, right? This was funded and pushed on our country by non-government organizations, right? Private organizations that fund Antifa, etc., etc., etc. These are not grassroots movements. It's key that you understand that, right? Media isn't blaming all of that on the COVID spikes, right? They're saying that it's normal people like me and you that went out and celebrated on Memorial Day. The reason this is key is because they are trying to shift the responsibility off of the actions that they allowed to take place, right? The inaction that they took allowed these protesters and rioters to run rampant through the streets. Meanwhile, they're blaming the everyday citizen that has been locked down in their house for 3 months willingly, right? We willingly consented to this and in most instances begged for the government to take control. And I made videos about this too, and I told you this is exactly what was going to happen if we hit our knees and let the government take control, and we literally begged them for it at the time. All right? It's not our fault that this second wave is coming. Rather, they allowed these protests and riots to take place. And in turn, they're going to use this as a guise, right, to say that COVID cases have spiked again. All right? And in turn, this is going to lead to the main majority of the public because they are stupid and sheep, right? And they've already hit their knees and begged once to have their rights taken away. And they've conditioned most people to thinking this is normal now. Because there's something about psychology you have to understand. People are creatures of habit. Now, psychologically speaking, how long does it take to make a habit turn into an everyday action for a person? It takes about 6 weeks. 6 weeks of doing the same thing over and over and over again before it becomes normalized in your mind and therefore reflected in your daily life and therefore accepted as normal by you. In turn, this is how they make people suffer injustice, because if the injustice is implemented, right, marginally, to the point where we ourselves form the habit, we don't even realize that we are being stifled. We don't even realize that we are being controlled because we see it as normal. And that is what they are doing. So just as things start to open back up, just as our habit of becoming hermits and staying under quarantine and not having social interactions are solidified, right? What happens? We have an event that triggers these riots, okay? It triggers this mass of people going out in the streets, giving the perfect opportunity for people who would benefit from quarantine being enforced to say that there's a second wave coming. Now, why is all of this very important to understand? It's because all of this is in a giant push to get quarantine reinstituted before the elections in November. Now, I don't care who you're voting for in November. I care less. I just want you to recognize that everything going on around you right now is to control and manipulate how you decide to operate when the time comes to vote. Do they want you to stay home and not cast your ballot? Are they trying to institute mail-in ballots in order to manipulate the election by harvesting ballots out of people's mailboxes before they go get their mail and writing in whatever name they want? I don't care who you support, but I want you to understand the actions that are being taken behind the scenes are ultimately going to be because of your own consent. And it might not be your consent, but it's going to be the majority, or at least the vocal minority's consent. Because let's be clear, everything that's happening in our country right now isn't because the majority of people agree with it. It's because the majority of people, as I've said in my previous videos, are too fearful to stand on their own 2 feet and say something that contradicts the mob. All right? And what this leads to is a sheep mentality and everything that we've been experiencing since the first of the year. So, what are we seeing happen right now? Well, as soon as everything started to open up, the stock market catapulted. This V-shaped recovery that Donald Trump and anybody who supports these lockdowns ending we're talking about is happening right before our eyes. But that can't happen for the powers that ought not be to stay in any kind of control. We cannot have the economy prospering and have Donald Trump lose. It's a non-starter. So they have no choice but to try to stop the economy, because I've said a million times over, we have literally trapped wounded animals into a corner, right? And they are in a fight for their life. And it only ends one of 2 ways. We slaughter the rabid animal in the corner, or the rabid animal slaughters us and manages to regain control. All right. Now, there's something else that needs to be stated very clearly here. This isn't just about the elections, although the elections are the capstone of all of this. This has to do with the criminality of Republican and Democrat alike, of the old guard, the deep state, the swamp, whatever you want to call it. This is distracting away from some of the biggest developments that have taken place politically in the United States over the last 50 years. How many of you are aware that Hillary Clinton is now being forced to testify in a deposition on September 9th to account for Benghazi, as well as all of her emails and that whole fiasco involving Seth Rich and everything else? How many of you are aware of that? How many of you knew that this was broadcast live, the hearing determining whether or not Hillary was actually going to have to testify? The answer is probably zero of you, and if you did hear about it, you heard about it from somebody like me, and if you didn't, I give you a lot of credit because it's something that I wasn't even aware of until after the fact. Right? But it's not just Hillary, it's a bunch of other people, including Brennan, Comey. All of this stuff is going on behind the scenes, and the media is covering a bunch of other events that is just serving to distract us and divide us even more. Whereas if everybody in our country were paying attention to the fact that indictments are coming from William Barr, Hillary Clinton is having to testify, Rod Rosenstein just had to testify, people aren't seeing what's going on behind the scenes, and what's going on behind the scenes is the dismantling of the old guard. So of course, the old guard is trying to do everything they can to subvert the will of the American people and in turn have us consent into giving them back control. That's everything that's happening right now. I just summed it all up. I hope the last 12 minutes, right, has given you a more clear understanding of what you're living through. At the end of the day, investing energy into trying to sway things one way or another is only going to serve to be detrimental to yourself and your family. Rather, I want you guys paying attention to what's going on and understanding when it's time for you to get out. Okay? Understand that things are going to come to a head here, okay? Especially with U.S. cities literally under insurrection. Your family right now is what's most important. Your safety is what's most important. Honestly, this country may not even be worth saving in its current state, in its current form. That's for each man, woman, and child to figure out for themselves. I'm only here to put the pieces together for you and tell you what the puzzle's actually going to turn out to be so you can make the best decisions for yourself. Because I'm telling you right now, what's good for me may not be good for you, may not be good for your neighbor. It's time that you stand on your own 2 feet and actually make a decision for yourself for a change. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to have yourself to blame one way or the other, all right? There's going to come a time and place where putting the blame on somebody else, although you may be able to do it, isn't going to get you out of the situation you're in. God bless, take care of yourselves, and understand that you're not in this alone. That's why we have this community. I suggest that we start networking together and honestly building this into something a little bit more, because God only knows there may come a day when we actually need each other in real life. Take care of yourselves and have a great day.